Hello, friends. Today's story is not about perfection. It is about mistakes and the quiet mercy that follows them. This is the story of a young woman who ran away for love and returned to find everything lost. A story of betrayal, shame, and a town that decided her sin defined her worth. But it is also the story of an enemy who did not punish her, a man who chose dignity over cruelty and love over judgment. Before redemption, there was suffering. Before forgiveness, there was silence. Now, let us go back to the moment where everything went wrong, to the night a girl trusted the wrong heart, and her fate changed forever. The town of Alder Creek sat quietly between dust-covered roads and low wooden homes, the kind of place where every smile was noticed and every mistake remembered. It was there that Elena Moore had lived her entire life, sheltered by two loving parents who believed the world could still be kind. Elena was their only child, gentle, curious, and full of dreams that stretched beyond the town's borders. She worked beside her mother in the small shop near the square, folding cloth and counting coins, while her father repaired wagons outside. Life was simple, safe, until Thomas Hale arrived. He was charming in the way danger often is, soft-spoken, confident, always smiling as if he knew secrets no one else did. He told stories of distant towns, of freedom, of a life where no one whispered behind closed doors. "You're too bright to stay here forever," he told her one evening, leaning against the shop counter. "You were meant for more than this place." Elena laughed nervously. "My parents need me." "They'll understand," Thomas said gently. "Love always finds a way." He promised marriage, protection, a future filled with laughter instead of routine. And Elena believed him. The night she left, her mother was asleep by the fire. Her father's tools were still laid out neatly, waiting for morning. Elena paused at the doorway, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. "I'll come back," she whispered to the dark room. "I promise." She never imagined that promise would break everything. The journey lasted only 2 days. On the third morning, Elena awoke to silence. Thomas was gone. So was the money, the food, the horse. She stood alone beside the road, the cold biting through her thin shawl, her heart pounding as truth settled in like poison. "He wouldn't," she whispered, but he had. Days later, dirty, exhausted, and hollow, Elena returned to Alder Creek. The town saw her before she saw them. Eyes turned away, doors closed, voices lowered. At the shop, strangers stood where her mother should have been. The windows were dark. The sign was gone. Her legs gave way. "Where are my parents?" she asked a passerby, her voice shaking. The woman hesitated, then sighed. "You didn't hear?" "Hear what?" "Your mother fell ill after people started talking. Your father tried to defend you, fought with the men who mocked your name." The woman lowered her eyes. "He collapsed 2 days later. They're both gone." The words did not land all at once. They shattered. Elena screamed, not loud but broken, the kind of sound that came from somewhere deep and raw. She fell to her knees in the dirt, hands clawing at the ground as if she could undo time itself. "I didn't know! I didn't know!" The town did not comfort her. They judged her. She brought shame. She ran away like a sinner. This is what happens to girls who forget their place. By nightfall, Elena had nowhere to sleep. That was when she went to her uncle, Robert Moore, her father's brother. He opened the door with a practiced smile and arms that pretended to welcome her. "Poor child, come in. Family takes care of its own." Elena collapsed into his embrace, unaware that his kindness was hollow. Behind his eyes, calculations were already being made. That night, as Elena lay curled on a thin mattress, staring at the ceiling, grief pressed down on her chest so heavily she could barely breathe. She had lost her parents, her home, her name. And as tears soaked the pillow, one truth rose above the pain like a blade. Running away for love had cost her everything. Outside, the wind howled through Alder Creek, and somewhere beyond the town's edge, a fate far crueler than shame was already moving toward her.
Morning came to Alder Creek without mercy. Elena woke to the sound of voices outside her uncle's house, low, sharp whispers that carried through thin wooden walls. Her eyes burned from crying, her body aching as if grief itself had weight. For a moment she forgot where she was, then memory rushed back all at once. Thomas, the road, her parents' deaths, the town's cold faces. She sat up slowly, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. From the other side of the wall, her uncle's voice drifted in. "She's trouble," someone muttered. "A shame on the family name," another replied. "She should never have come back." Elena's hands trembled. Robert Moore cleared his throat. "People talk too much. The girl's already paid for her mistakes." A pause followed, then a different voice, rougher. "Mistakes like hers don't wash away easy." The footsteps moved off. Silence returned. Elena swallowed hard. Even here, under her uncle's roof, she was not safe from judgment. When she stepped outside later that morning, the town made sure she felt unwelcome. Women she once greeted crossed the street to avoid her. Men stared openly, their looks sharp and accusing. Children whispered behind their hands. She passed the old shop, her shop, and could not bring herself to look inside. By midday, she returned to her uncle's house, exhausted. Robert sat at the table, counting coins, his fingers moving faster than usual. He looked up and forced a smile. "You shouldn't wander alone," he said. "People haven't forgotten." Elena nodded. "I'll stay inside." He studied her for a moment. "You've been through enough. Let your uncle handle things." She wanted to believe him. That night, she cried quietly into her blanket, grief mixing with guilt until she could no longer tell them apart. Days passed. Elena did everything she could to make herself useful, cleaning, cooking, keeping her head down, but no amount of obedience softened the town's hatred, nor did it ease the tension in her uncle's eyes. Robert grew restless. He left early, returned late. Sometimes he heard him arguing with unseen visitors outside the house. One evening, Elena overheard words that made her blood run cold. "She's worthless now," a man scoffed. "Worthless?" Robert replied sharply. "Not to the right person." Elena pressed her mouth to her mouth, her heart hammering. "What are you talking about?" the man asked. Robert lowered his voice. "There's someone who owes me. He wants leverage, a woman with no family, no reputation, no one to miss her." Elena backed away from the door, terror creeping up her spine. No, he wouldn't. But he did. The next morning, Robert told her they were traveling. "There's a man who can help you start over," he said, avoiding her eyes. She hesitated. Why would he help me? Robert smiled thinly. Because everyone deserves a second chance. She wanted to ask more questions. She wanted to run. But where could she go? The town had already erased her. So she packed her few belongings and followed him. They rode for hours, leaving Alder Creek far behind. The land grew rougher, quieter. Elena's unease turned into dread. By the time they stopped, her hands were numb from gripping the reins. A lone homestead stood ahead, dark wood, solid, surrounded by open land. Smoke curled faintly from the roof. Robert dismounted first. "That's him," he said. "Stay quiet." The door opened before they reached it. A tall native man stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. His presence was calm but commanding, eyes sharp as they moved from Robert to Elena. "This is her," Robert said quickly, "as promised." Elena's breath caught. "Promised?" she whispered. Robert did not look at her. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small pouch. Coins clinked softly. The native man nodded once and handed over a larger bag in return. Elena stumbled back. "Uncle, what is this?" Robert finally met her eyes. There was no shame there, only relief. "I'm sorry," he said flatly, "but you're already ruined. At least this way, you're useful." The native man spoke for the first time, his voice low and controlled. "She is not livestock." Robert shrugged. "Then treat her better than the town did." And with that, he turned away, mounting his horse without another word. Elena stood frozen, staring after him as he rode off, dust swallowing his figure. Her knees buckled. She had been abandoned again. The native man watched her carefully, then spoke quietly. "You are safe here. No one will touch you." Elena laughed bitterly through tears. "That's what they all say." He shook his head. "I did not buy you to harm you." She looked up, fear and fury battling in her eyes. "Then why am I here?" He paused before answering. "Because sometimes mercy comes from the last place you expect."
The door closed behind them with a dull, final sound. Elena flinched. The homestead was quieter than she expected. No shouting, no chains, no men waiting in shadows, just a simple room warmed by a fire, clean and carefully kept. It confused her more than cruelty would have. The native man set his rifle against the wall and removed his coat slowly, deliberately, as if to show he meant no harm. "My name is Tayan Black Elk," he said. "You will stay in the back room." He pointed down a short hallway. Elena's throat tightened. "And after that?" Tayan looked at her fully then, his dark eyes steady. "After that, you decide what you need to survive." She stared at him. "You bought me." "I paid your uncle," he corrected calmly, "not you." Her hands curled into fists. "That doesn't make it better." "No," he agreed, "but it makes it different." He picked up a lantern and led her to a small room at the end of the hall. It held a narrow bed, a table, and a basin of clean water. A folded blanket lay neatly at the foot of the bed. Elena waited for him to step inside. He didn't. "This room is yours," he said. "I will not enter unless you ask." She let out a shaky breath. "Why?" Tayan hesitated, then answered honestly, "Because fear has already taken enough from you." Before she could reply, he turned and walked away, leaving her alone. That night, Elena did not sleep. She sat on the edge of the bed listening to every sound, the crackle of the fire, the wind outside, the steady rhythm of Tayan's footsteps in another room. She expected him to come for her. She waited for the moment when kindness would fall away. It never did. Morning came with pale sunlight through the small window. Elena stepped cautiously into the main room. Tayan was already awake, kneeling near the hearth, preparing food. He did not look at her right away. "There is bread and water." She hovered near the doorway. "What do you expect from me?" He finally met her gaze. "Nothing." The word felt heavier than any command. "You think I don't know why I'm here?" She snapped suddenly. "Men like you don't pay for women out of charity." Tayan stood slowly, careful not to startle her. "Men like me," he said evenly, "have buried enough women to know suffering when they see it."
Elena's anger faltered. "I was told you were cruel," she whispered. "People tell stories about enemies. It helps them sleep at night." She ate the bread with trembling hands. It was warm, fresh. She hated how grateful it made her feel. Days passed. Elena stayed mostly in her room at first, bracing herself for a punishment that never came. But hunger and restlessness eventually drove her out. She began helping quietly, sweeping, washing dishes, tending the fire. Tayan never ordered her to work, never stopped her either. When she scrubbed floors until her hands cracked, he noticed. "You do not have to prove your worth here," he said one evening. She didn't look up. "I do." He frowned slightly but did not argue. At night, Elena lay awake replaying her life, running away, betrayal, her parents' deaths. She whispered apologies into the darkness, unsure who they were meant for. One night, she heard Tayan outside, sharpening a blade. The sound scraped against her nerves. "You're waiting for me to fail," she accused, stepping into the doorway. He paused. "Why would I want that?" "So you can say I deserve whatever happens next." Tayan set the blade down slowly. "You think I see you as guilty." She swallowed. "Don't you?" He shook his head. "I see someone who was used." The words struck her harder than any insult. "Then why keep me?" she demanded. "Why not send me away?" His voice dropped. "Because the world is not kind to women who have nowhere to go." Silence stretched between them. For the first time since she returned to town, Elena felt something unfamiliar. Not safety, but dignity. That night, Elena cried, not from fear, but confusion. She had prepared herself for violence, for hatred, for punishment. Instead, she was being treated like a human being, and she didn't know how to live with that.
Elena woke before dawn. The house was still, wrapped in that deep silence that came just before the world breathed again. For a moment, she lay staring at the low wooden ceiling, listening to her own heartbeat. Then the memories returned, her parents' faces, the whispers in town, the way her uncle's hand had closed around the coins. She sat up. This was where she belonged now, she told herself. Not because Tayan had bought her, but because she deserved nothing better. Elena rose quietly and dressed, tying her hair back the way servants did. When she stepped into the main room, Tayan was already awake, feeding the fire. He glanced up, surprised to see her so early. "You don't need to be up yet," he said. She avoided his eyes. "I want to work." He studied her for a long moment. "No one here is forcing you." "I know," she replied softly. "That's why I choose it." She took a broom and began sweeping, slow and careful. Dust curled into the air, catching the pale morning light. Tayan watched but did not stop her. From that day on, Elena worked tirelessly. She scrubbed floors until her knees ached. She cooked meals she barely tasted. She washed clothes by the river, her hands raw from cold water. If pain came, she welcomed it. Pain made sense. Pain felt earned. Tayan never raised his voice, never demanded more. Sometimes he watched her with a troubled expression, as if he wanted to say something but did not know how. One evening, he found her trying to lift a heavy water bucket by herself. It slipped, spilling water across the dirt floor. "Let me," he said, reaching for it. She pulled back sharply. "Please, let me do it." "Why?" he asked quietly. Her voice shook. "Because if I stop, I'll remember." Tayan set the bucket down gently. "Remember what?" She swallowed hard. "That I destroyed everything I touched." The words hung between them, heavy as smoke. "You were betrayed. That is not the same as destroying." She shook her head. "My parents are dead." His jaw tightened. "Because a town chose cruelty over compassion."
"And because I ran away," she whispered. "If I hadn't—" "Enough," Tayan said firmly, not angry but resolute. "You will not carry the sins of others here." Elena looked up at him then, eyes bright with unshed tears. "You don't understand. I need this. I need to feel like I'm paying for what I did." Tayan exhaled slowly. "Pain is not payment. It only multiplies." But he did not forbid her from working. Weeks passed. Elena learned the rhythms of the homestead, the way sunlight crept across the floor in the mornings, the sound of Tayan returning each evening. She learned his habits, his silences. He spoke little, but when he did, his words were thoughtful, careful. Sometimes he brought her small things without comment, a warmer blanket, fresh fruit, a repaired shoe. She never thanked him, not because she wasn't grateful, but because gratitude felt too close to hope, and hope frightened her more than despair. One afternoon, Tayan returned with a deep cut on his arm, blood seeping through his sleeve. Elena gasped and rushed forward without thinking. "Sit," she ordered, her voice sharp with fear. He obeyed. As she cleaned the wound, her hands trembled. "You could have been killed." "He could have been too," he replied gently. "Every day, by people who think mercy is weakness." She tied the bandage tightly, her eyes filling. "Why do you let them think that?" Tayan met her gaze. "Because I know who I am." She laughed bitterly. "I don't." He watched her carefully. "Then maybe this place can help you remember." That night, Elena sat by the fire long after Tayan had gone to sleep. The flames flickered, casting shadows that danced across the walls. She hugged her knees to her chest, exhaustion weighing heavy on her bones. For the first time since she'd been sold, a dangerous thought crept into her heart. What if she was not being punished here? What if she was being forgiven? The idea terrified her, because forgiveness meant she would have to forgive herself, and she wasn't ready for that.
The illness came quietly. Tayan did not complain when the fever first took hold. He still rose before dawn, still worked the land, still returned at sunset with dust on his boots and silence on his shoulders. But Elena noticed the changes others might miss. The way his steps slowed, the way his breath came heavier, the way his hands trembled when he thought no one was watching. One evening, he collapsed just inside the doorway. Elena dropped the bowl she was holding. It shattered against the floor, broth spilling like dark stains across the dirt. She rushed to him, knees hitting the ground hard as she caught his weight. "Tan," she whispered urgently. "Look at me." His skin burned beneath her touch. That night, Elena did not sleep. She sat beside him, pressing cool cloths to his forehead, murmuring words she did not know she remembered, soft prayers her mother once whispered when storms rattled their old home. Every shallow breath he took tightened something in her chest she did not want to name. "You can't leave," she said at one point, her voice breaking despite herself. "Not like this." His eyes fluttered open briefly. "I'm not going anywhere." She almost laughed at the lie. For days she barely left his side. She forgot punishment, forgot guilt, forgot even herself. There was only the rhythm of caring, water, herbs, whispered encouragement. "You rest," she told him firmly when he tried to sit up. "You shouldn't carry this alone," he murmured weakly. She shook her head. "I owe you more than this." "No," he said, his voice stronger than she expected. "You don't owe me anything." The words struck her harder than any accusation ever had. When the fever finally broke, Tayan slept deeply, peacefully, as if some long-held tension had finally loosened its grip. Elena watched his chest rise and fall, relief flooding her so suddenly it scared her. That was the moment she understood. This was not duty. This was not punishment. This was love.
The realization felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, beautiful, terrifying, impossible to turn away from. She stood abruptly and walked outside, cold air biting at her cheeks as tears spilled freely. She pressed her hands over her mouth, shaking. "I can't," she whispered into the night. "I can't love you." Because love meant hope, and hope meant the risk of losing everything again. Days later, when Tayan had regained his strength, Elena sat across from him at the small table. The fire crackled softly between them. "I need to leave," she said suddenly. Tayan froze. "What?" His voice was calm, but something sharp flickered behind his eyes. "I've stayed long enough," she continued, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "I've come here to pay for my mistakes. I've done that." "And where will you go?" he asked. "That doesn't matter." "It matters to me," he said quietly. She swallowed hard. "If I stay longer, I'll want things I don't deserve." Silence stretched between them, heavy and aching. "You think love is a reward, something you earn through suffering." She looked away. "Isn't it?" "No," he said firmly. "Love is a choice." She laughed bitterly. "You don't know what I've done. I know who you are now, and that is enough." Her voice trembled. "If I leave, you won't stop me?" Tayan stood slowly, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the room. "I won't chain you," he said. "I never wanted ownership." Her chest ached. "Then why does this feel so hard?" He hesitated, then spoke the truth he had been avoiding for months. "Because somewhere along the way, mercy turned into something I didn't plan for." She looked up sharply. "And what is that?" she asked, though her heart already knew. Tayan held her gaze, his voice low and unguarded. "Love."
Elena did not sleep that night. Tayan's confession echoed through her thoughts again and again, refusing to fade. Love. The word felt too fragile to touch, too dangerous to accept. She lay on her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet sounds of the homestead, the wind brushing the walls, the soft crack of cooling embers in the hearth. By morning, she had made a decision. She would leave. Not because she did not love him, but because she did. She rose early, folding the few belongings she owned with careful hands. Every movement felt heavier than the last. The simple dress, the worn shawl, the memory of the girl she used to be, and the woman she had become in this silent place of mercy. When she stepped outside, Tayan was already there, repairing a fence post. He looked up the moment he heard her footsteps. "You're awake early," he said. "So are you," she replied. Their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them. "I'm leaving today," Elena said, forcing the words out before courage failed her. The hammer slipped from Tayan's hand and hit the ground with a dull thud. He did not rush toward her. He did not raise his voice. He simply stood still, as if the earth itself had shifted beneath his feet. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Because staying is no longer punishment, and I don't know how to live without pain." Tayan stepped closer, stopping a careful distance away. "Do you think love erases the past?" "No," she said quickly. "I think it makes it heavier." "Then let me carry it with you." Her breath caught. "You don't know what you're asking." "I do," he said. "I've known loss. I've known shame. I've known silence so deep it nearly swallowed me. And still, I choose you." Tears blurred her vision. "I ran away once. I destroyed my parents. I destroyed myself. What if I destroy you too?" Tayan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he gently took her hands. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "You were betrayed. You were punished by people who wanted a story, not the truth.
What happened to your parents was not your crime." She shook her head, sobbing now. "The town still sees me as a sinner." "I don't," he said. "I see a woman who stayed when she could have fled, who cared for a man she thought was her enemy, who chose kindness even when she believed she deserved none." She sank to her knees, grief pouring out of her at last. Tayan knelt with her, wrapping his arms around her as she cried against his chest. "I don't know how to be loved," she whispered. "Then we will learn together," he replied. For the first time, he held her without fear, not as an enemy, not as a protector, but as a man who had finally allowed himself to need someone. Elena pulled back slightly, searching his face. "If I stay," she said shakily, "it must be because I choose you, not because I'm afraid to go." Tayan nodded. "That is the only way I want you here." She hesitated, then asked the question that had haunted her heart. "If I stay, will you ever see me as more than a burden?" Tayan lifted her chin gently. "You are not my burden," he said. "You are my turning point." The words broke something open inside her. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. Their breaths mingled, warm and unsteady. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "No one ever does," he replied softly. "That's why it's a gift." They stayed there a long time, neither rushing the moment. The sun climbed higher, casting golden light across the land that had once felt like a prison and now felt like a beginning. Elena rose slowly, wiping her tears. She looked at the small bundle she had prepared to leave behind. She untied it. "I'll stay," she said, "but not as a servant, not as a prisoner." Tayan smiled, small, unsure, but real. "As my wife, by choice." She nodded, her voice steady at last. "By choice." As they stood together, a distant rider appeared on the horizon, moving fast, purposeful. Elena felt a chill. The past, it seemed, had not finished testing their choice.
The rider reached the homestead just before sunset. Dust clung to his coat, and urgency weighed down his posture. Tayan stepped forward instinctively, placing himself between the stranger and Elena, not in possession, but in protection. "What do you want?" Tayan asked, his voice calm but firm. The man dismounted slowly. "News," he said, "from the town." Elena's heart began to pound. She already knew what kind of news traveled this far. "They know where she is," the rider continued, nodding toward her. "Your uncle spoke. He told them everything." Elena closed her eyes. So the past had finally found her. "They're saying she was stolen," the man went on, "that she belongs back there. Some are calling for her return, others, punishment." Tayan's jaw tightened. "And what do you think?" The rider hesitated. "I think they're wrong, but towns don't move on truth, they move on fear." When the rider left, silence settled over the land like an approaching storm. Elena turned away, wrapping her arms around herself. "This is why I wanted to leave," she said quietly. "I bring trouble wherever I go." Tayan stepped beside her. "No," he said. "Trouble follows those who refuse to let go of control." "They'll come," she whispered. "And when they do, they'll destroy everything you've built." Tayan looked at the homestead, the land, the walls, the quiet life he had known before she arrived. Then he looked at her. "I've lost places before. I won't lose you." She shook her head, tears gathering. "You shouldn't have to fight for me." "I'm not fighting for you," he corrected gently. "I'm standing with you." That night, Elena could not stop shaking. Old fears crept back in, the whispers, the judgment, the way the town had turned on her parents. She sat by the fire, staring into the flames, lost in memories that burned just as fiercely. Tayan joined her, sitting close but not touching. "You don't have to stay," she said suddenly. "If you send me away, I'll understand." He turned to her, eyes steady. "I didn't choose you because you were easy to protect. I chose you because you were worth standing beside." She laughed bitterly. "You talk like love is simple." "It's not. That's why it matters." She looked at him then, really looked, at the man who had given her dignity when she expected cruelty, who had offered silence instead of demands, who had loved her without trying to own her. "What if they come tomorrow?" "Then we face them." "And if they take me by force?" Tayan's voice dropped. "They won't." She searched his face. "How can you be so sure?" "Because," he said softly, "you are not property anymore. Not theirs, not mine. You are your own woman." Something inside Elena finally shifted. All her life, choices had been taken from her, by a lover who betrayed her, by a town that judged her, by an uncle who sold her, even by herself when she believed pain was all she deserved. Now, for the first time, she stood in a moment that belonged entirely to her. She reached for Tayan's hand. "I choose you, not because I owe you, not because I'm afraid, but because when I am with you, I am not broken." Tayan closed his eyes briefly, emotion crossing his face like a quiet storm. When he opened them, they shone. "Then I choose you too, every day, no matter who comes." She leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her, not claiming, not restraining, only holding. Outside, the wind rose again, rattling the walls. Somewhere far off, voices from the town were already forming plans. But inside the homestead, something stronger than fear had taken root. As night fell, a distant glow appeared on the horizon. Firelight, coming closer. The fire on the horizon grew brighter as the night deepened. Elena stood at the doorway, her heart pounding, watching the glow flicker against the dark sky. Every crackle of distant flame felt like a memory returning. Judgment, cruelty, and the town that had already taken everything from her once. "They're coming," she whispered. Tayan stepped beside her, placing a calm, steady hand over hers. "Then they will see the truth," he said. By dawn, riders appeared at the edge of the land, men from the town, led by the same voices that once condemned Elena's parents. Their faces were hard, their words already sharp with accusation. "She was stolen," one man shouted. "She belongs to us." Elena felt her knees weaken, but she did not step back. Tayan moved forward instead. "She belongs to herself," he said clearly, "and she is here by choice." Laughter broke out among the men. "Choice?" another scoffed. "She ran once, she'll run again." Elena's chest tightened, but then she heard her own voice rise, stronger than she ever believed possible. "I ran because I was foolish. I returned because I was broken, but I stayed here because I was shown mercy." The men fell quiet. "You judged me without knowing my heart. You blamed me for grief I never caused. And when I believed I deserved pain, this man gave me dignity instead." She looked at Tayan then, her eyes shining with tears. "He did not punish me, he healed me." One of the elders stepped forward slowly. "If you are free," he asked, "then come back with us." Elena shook her head. "I am free," she said. "That is why I will not return." Silence stretched long and heavy. The men looked at one another, uncertain now. The certainty they carried had cracked. At last, the elder lowered his gaze. "Then the town has no claim." The riders turned away, one by one, their fire dying with them. When they were gone, Elena's legs finally gave out.
Tayan caught her before she fell, holding her close as her tears came, this time not from fear, but release. "It's over," he murmured. "They no longer define you." She looked up at him, her voice trembling. "Neither does my past." That evening, under a sky washed clean by rain, they stood before the small circle of people who had become their quiet family. There was no grand ceremony, no town approval, no chains of obligation, only choice. Tayan took her hands. "I once believed mercy was weakness," he said. "You taught me it is strength." Elena smiled through tears. "I once believed pain was my punishment," she replied. "You taught me it was never required." They joined their lives not through ownership, but through forgiveness. Months passed. The homestead changed. Laughter replaced silence. Elena no longer worked to punish herself, but to build. She planted, cooked, and sang again. Tayan's home became warm not because of walls, but because of love lived openly. And one quiet morning, as sunlight filtered through the doorway, Elena placed Tayan's hand over her heart, her breath unsteady. "There is something you should know," she whispered. He looked at her, concern rising. "What is it?" Tears spilled as she smiled. "We are not empty anymore." Understanding dawned slowly, then all at once. Tayan pulled her into his arms, overcome, not because fate had rewarded them, but because love had rewritten everything they believed about loss. The woman who once thought she deserved suffering found redemption. The man once called an enemy found a home. And together they proved a simple truth the world too often forgets. Redemption is not earned through pain, it is given through love.